Good morning. Glad to see you all made it today. If you're in a children's church, you can be dismissed at this time to go to your classes. For the next several Sundays, we're going to be going through the book of Acts. We're going through the book of Luke. Luke wrote Acts, and so that's where I'm at. All right, going through the book of Luke, and we aren't going to be able to hit every passage in the book of Luke, not even every important passage in the book of Luke, but we're going to go through chapter by chapter and hit some highlights from this book, from the Gospel of Luke, and look at some key passages. Before we go much further, I want to take a quick look, a quick overview on what we know as the Gospel of Luke. It was written by a man named Luke. Now, the slides we got, it's not that Luke that we're talking about. It's a very important Luke in our culture, but that's not the Luke that we're talking about. And it's not this other Luke either. So we don't recognize that Luke. So again, not the Luke we're going to be spending these next couple months talking about. And there's some more Lukes that you may be familiar with. But none of these, long before all of these Lukes, there was the Luke that wrote the Gospel of the book of Luke. So here's some things we know about Luke. He was a companion of, hope you can see that better back there than I can see that right there. So I might have to start making my fonts bigger. So he was a companion of Paul, a friend of Paul, who sometimes traveled with Paul on a few of his missionary journeys. Luke would travel with Paul. We know that he was a physician by trade. Colossians 4, Colossians was written by Paul, and he has this to say in Colossians 4:14. It says, "Our dear friend Luke, the doctor, sends his greetings." So he's familiar with Paul was familiar with Luke. Luke was familiar with Paul. They traveled together. He was a physician by trade and wrote this book around 60 AD. You can, when you look at the original language that Luke was written in, you can tell he was an educated man. This is the language of Luke. It shows him, and it's the most comprehensive of the Gospels. It includes the most. There's more original content in Luke than there are the other three Gospels. He was very comprehensive language, very educated when you look at the sources. So probably because of his experience as a physician, Luke really talks a lot about diseases and diagnosis, and Jesus is healing people, and the miraculous stuff, the supernatural stuff that Jesus did. When Jesus showed that he had power over disease, illness, nature, those are the things that Luke really tends to talk about, probably because of the fact that he was a physician. And he also gives a prominent place to women. When you look through Luke and also through Acts, which he also wrote, the women in Jesus' ministry and the women in the early church, Luke always makes sure they get mentioned when he writes. So we're going to look first at just the first chapter in Luke. Before we get to our main text today, we're just going to look at the first few verses. So if you want to open up to Luke chapter 1, we're going to read the first 4 verses and just kind of give us an overview, an introduction to this book. Luke writes this in chapter 1. He says, "Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who were from the first, were eyewitnesses and servants of the word." We're going to stop there just for a second. So what does this tell us? This tells us that, he says, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled. So Luke wasn't the first person to write down events of Jesus' life and his ministry and the things he was. He wasn't the first, he wasn't the only. When Luke was writing this, there were other Gospels around. There were other people that were writing things down. And so we know this wasn't the first one. But he says in verse 3, "Therefore, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, it seemed good also for me to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught." So Luke is saying there's other people that have taken into account, but I took it on myself and I carefully investigated. Luke came across his gospel. We talked about in Sunday school about news and reporting and fake news a little bit, and how you read it on Twitter now, it's fact, right? And nobody does their research. But Luke was a researcher. He was an investigator. And as he traveled, this was written in 60 AD. People that knew Jesus were still alive, were still around, and he was interviewing them and investigating the facts, going to the places that Jesus went and asking the people about what had happened. Very likely, Mary was still alive. The apostles were still alive. So he was going to the sources and investigating and writing things down and taking notes because he wanted to give an orderly account, he says, of the things that happened. So he's very orderly. He's very exact and comprehensive in his writing. He addresses this to most excellent Theophilus. Now, Theophilus is a name that means lover of God. And there are some that say this is kind of a code word, like a code name, and this is written to a large group of people, lovers of God. This letter is to lovers of God. And so Theophilus is like a code word. But I believe it was a name, and I believe that Luke is writing this to a specific person whose name was Theophilus. Now, in the same way that Paul wrote Timothy to Timothy, but Timothy is really for all of us. Paul wrote Titus to Titus, but Titus is for all of us. So in the same way that the other books were written to a person, but also to us, because the Holy Spirit works that way, I believe it's the same with Luke. Luke wanted he had this friend Theophilus, and he is trying to help him be certain of the things that he'd been taught, the things he'd been hearing about Jesus. I want to prove to you that they're true, and so I'm writing this to you. And but we all get a benefit from that. We all have something. So the Holy Spirit, through Luke, is writing this. So I wanted to just real quickly get us to Luke 5, because Luke 5 is where we're going to stop today and camp out. But Luke 1 and 2, we have the events of Christmas, and the events surrounding Jesus' birth. We just came up past Christmas time, and we hit a lot of those events. And with the Mary, the angel visiting Mary, the shepherds, all that stuff, Luke 1 and 2 records those things. In Luke 3, we have Jesus' baptism, and we talk about John the Baptist, and then Jesus is baptized. It lists the genealogy of Jesus. And then in 4, where we were at last Sunday, is the temptation. Jesus is led to the wilderness, and Satan tempts him in the wilderness. So that gets us to Luke chapter 5. So if you want to turn there, that's where we're going to be spending a lot of our time. Right before the events of Luke 5, something else that happens in Luke 4 that I just want to mention again is that, well, let me back up a little bit. I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. So after Jesus is tempted in the wilderness, he begins his public ministry. He's going to towns in Galilee. Every town has a synagogue where the word of God is taught, and he's going around the synagogues. He's teaching. He's healing people. He's beginning his ministry in these towns. He even goes to the town of Nazareth, his hometown, but is not well received there at all. Actually, kind of gets run out of town. He has to escape his own hometown. He was not well received there. And from there, he ends up in a town called Capernaum, which is a town right off of the Sea of Galilee, and right there on the shore. The water provides a lot of the economy, as we're going to see in Luke 5. And so Capernaum becomes kind of his headquarters, if you would, for his early ministry. I mean, Jesus did a lot of traveling. He went place to place. But Capernaum, for those beginning ministry, is kind of the place he comes back to, the place he operates out of. And he makes friends there, and he calls his disciples largely from that area. And so it's kind of where his base becomes from. And so one of those people that he's meeting in Capernaum is this family, Simon, and we know him as Simon Peter, and later we just call him Peter. And it's one of the acquaintances, one of the people Jesus meets, and we see that Jesus went to the home of Simon, whether he was invited over for dinner, whether he was staying there for a while, we don't know, but at one point, Simon's mother-in-law is very sick, and Jesus heals her. So he is very familiar with this family and had that personal connection. I just want to keep that in mind because he's going to have a run-in with Simon Peter here in chapter 5. So let's get to Luke 5. Luke 5, chapter 5, verse 1. and we're going to take this first section. We're reading 1 through 11, but we're going to stop along the way. One day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, that's the Sea of Galilee, and Lake of Gennesaret and Sea of Tiberias, all names for the same thing. I was trying to do research and figuring out why they had different names. I didn't really get a real clear answer, but everybody says it's the same thing. It's called different things by different people. And so he's there, and the people are crowding around him and listening to the Word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon. So we know from the last chapter he knows Simon. So it was some random stranger's boat, but it was somebody he knew. And he asked Simon if he could put out a little from the shore. So he sat down and began teaching people from the boat. So here's the scene. Jesus is teaching people. He's on the water's edge. The crowds are coming in to hear him. He's been doing some healing. He's been casting out demons. So he's got a reputation. Momentum's starting to build. People are coming from the countryside, and they're crowding him out, and he's running out of space. And so he asks Simon to get into his boat, and they put off a little bit out into the water, and he continues teaching from the boat. Now this accomplishes 2 things. It accomplishes that space from the crowd, so he's not getting pressed in, and it's the chaos of the crowd. It gives him that buffer, so he can continue teaching without the crowd crowding him, so to speak. But also the experts say that platform, acoustically, the boat being where it was and the shore line being shaped the way it was, it would have allowed him to speak to the crowd even more effectively, just acoustically speaking. So it accomplished 2 things by being on the boat and teaching out of the boat. Let's keep going. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." So, fishing, when you're not doing it for recreation, when fishing is your job, it's hard work. And Simon Peter and his brother Andrew, that's what they did for a living, as they've been doing it for a while. More than likely, their dad was a fisherman, their grandpa was a fisherman. And in that culture, the men kept the trade of their fathers down from generation to generation. So at a very young age, they were learning how to fish, how to take care of the nets, how to take care of the boats. And it was a lot of hard work. And we're going to see James and John, 2 other brothers, also fishermen that were there on the water that day. Very likely a family partnership that had been going on through generations. So James and John's parents were fishermen and grandparents were fishermen, and these families more than likely had a partnership going on. Not just a family business, but a partnership between 2 families where they did fishing and together like that. And I've heard it said that your worst day fishing is better than your best day in the office. But it didn't work that way for these men, because fishing was their work. The boat was their office. And so it was hard work for them. And an empty boat meant an empty paycheck. They spend all night out on the boat, and I don't know if you've ever had the joy of flipping burgers in your past. And you come home and you smell like grease and the French fry. You smell like all that stuff. You bring it home and it's just stuck in your clothes. Well, they were all day with fish, and so it was a dirty and a smelly and a hard job to do. And on this particular day, it was not a good night. They'd been out all night and had not caught anything. And an empty boat, like I said, is an empty paycheck. So they weren't in the best of moods. I'm sure as they were on shore, they were cleaning their nets. Jesus kind of over to the side listening. They knew Jesus, they were familiar with him. So they're kind of paying attention with one ear as they worked. And Jesus wants to use their boats. And out of friendship or out of respect, they let him get in the boat. And that's fine. Then he wants to go fishing. And Peter very reluctantly agrees. It's like we've been out all night. We haven't caught anything. Jesus, I totally trust your religious opinions and the stuff you're teaching about God's word, but I know fish. I know when to fish. I know where to fish. And we just came from there and didn't catch anything. But reluctantly, whether it was, like I said, out of friendship, out of respect, the fact that Jesus had healed his mother-in-law, whatever it was, he reluctantly agrees, and they go out into the water. Verse 6. When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. So, this tremendous, miraculous catch of fish. And so much fish that they got to call another boat to come next to them, and both boats are about to sink. Tremendous, tremendous miracle of God. And Peter's response, like we talked about, we were talking about other topics, his response, when you see God, your response is often to get on your knees and to fall down and to worship. And that's what Peter did. He falls down, and I'm not worthy. Get away from me, I'm a sinful man. And Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on you will catch men." Some versions might say you'll be a fisher of men. So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. And that was the calling of Jesus' first disciples. We're going to see later on, he calls a few more men, and they become known as the 12 apostles. And Jesus is 12. So I want to look at this calling of Jesus, the call to a disciple. We're going to look at that and pull a little bit from it today, because we are called to be disciples also. And so how do what can we gain from this? What can we see from this? So the first thing I want to look at is the who. The who to God's call. And we can see that God's call is diverse. It crosses a wide variety of people. There's nobody that God doesn't call out to and want to accept the call. We have, in the story, we have fishermen. We have fishermen who were not a well-educated lot. They were not very classy. They smelled like fish. They didn't have a lot of respect. Didn't have the best reputation. They weren't invited to, the up-and-coming parties. They were, just common laborers. But Jesus chooses them to be some of his first followers. These fishermen, these common fishermen that nobody would think of starting a movement with. That's what Jesus picked. But it wasn't just that. This is written down and recorded to us by a physician, kind of the other side of the spectrum, somebody who was well educated, was well respected, did have that influence. God chose that person, Luke, to be a recorder of the gospel, to be writing this stuff down. So from opposite ends, God's call is diverse. Later on in Luke 5, we see God call a man named Levi, we know him as Matthew, a tax collector. And if you've been in church long enough, you've heard a preacher somewhere talk about tax collectors and how they were viewed by the rest of the Jewish people and as just traitors because they collected money for the Roman government and they made money by overtaxing and overcharging and lining their pockets with the money that they overtaxed people. So they were seen as traitors, as cheats, and the only friends that a tax collector had was other tax collectors, and maybe their mom. Right? And Jesus chooses a tax collector to be a disciple, to be one of his apostles, to one of the 12. God's call is diverse. It goes beyond nationalities and skin colors. It goes beyond social status. God's call is diverse. He extends his call. So if you are feeling like you're worthless, like you don't have anything to offer God, nobody sees any worth in you, then God's call is for you. If you feel like you're too busy, you have too many responsibilities, I just have too much to do, God's still calling you to be a disciple. It doesn't matter where you see yourself or where others see you, God's call reaches to you. And he accepts us but we have to accept the call. Talk about the how of the call. That was kind of the who. It's diverse. He reached out to all spectrums and all, from the religious leaders down to the sinners. His call was diverse. Talk about the how of the call. God accepts us, and we have to accept his call. We even see in this story that Peter reluctantly obeys and goes out to fish. He's like, we've tried this, we've done this, I don't have my hopes up, but I'm going to go. So sometimes even in our reluctant obedience, God can use us. Sometimes we're not even sure, we don't have to have this immense, giant faith. The Bible says that faith is the size of a mustard seed. So even that reluctant, well, God, I'm not sure what you can do with me, but I'm going to obey you anyway. That's how the call works. Also, how the call works is that God provides through the call. He provides for us. He doesn't call us to something and not provide for us. He doesn't leave us stranded, send us somewhere, and then back away and abandon us. He provides for us. Something interesting I was thinking of is looking at this passage, and I'm gonna be totally honest with you. This is Bryan wrote. This is not. I don't have any other verses to back this up. This is just something in my thoughts. But I was thinking about this miracle. And Jesus could have done a lot of things to get Peter's attention, his brother's attention, and to show his power so they would follow him and become his disciples. They kind of show, I am God's son, I am divine. And he could have done a lot of different miracles. Even looking at the ones we know he could do. I mean, Jesus could do anything. But let's just look. He could have taken water, plenty of water around. He could have water into wine. He could have turned the Sea of Galilee into wine to prove how powerful he was and get their attention. He could have... after he was done speaking, it could have been like a mic drop moment. He could have just jumped out of the boat and walked off across the water, and exited that way, because we know he walks on water. So he could have done all these different things to get their attention. But I was thinking about what he did by giving them this miraculous catch of fish. And just maybe, again, this is me, but just maybe, he wasn't only proving that he could do a miraculous thing. But I was thinking what that would mean to a fisherman. Because they are about ready to leave and follow Jesus. We know Simon had a mother-in-law, so we know he had a family. The others may have had families. But they were about ready to leave their families and follow Jesus. And I was thinking of that boat of fish and what that would mean to a fisherman. I mean, that would be like winning the lottery. There was dollar signs in that. So what if Jesus not only was providing a miracle to show that he could, but what if that was his way of providing for their families, so when they followed Jesus, their families would be taken care of. I mean, that was, when you think about a normal catch, a normal day's work, and how much they brought home, that may have been enough to provide for their families in those few years that they followed Jesus. Not just me, but one thing I do know is God provides for us. He equips us. He doesn't call us to something that he hasn't readiness for, and he won't provide for us. The other how and how the call works is God uses us. Because another thing Jesus could have done is he could have just made the fish jump into the boat. That still would have been a miracle. They could have been going out there and just start jumping in and piling into the boat on their own. But instead, to decide they go through the act of